I'll start by saying I'm a bit hesitant to say good evening because we're not here because of any good event that has taken place. We're here today to talk about the details of the kidnapping and murder that occurred yesterday, July 9th, at approximately 12 o'clock in the 1200 block of 10th Avenue. Officers were dispatched at approximately 12:07 p.m. for a woman who advised that her 6-year-old daughter had come home and advised that a man took her 10-year-old sister. At approximately 12:40 p.m., officers were flagged down by a male who reported locating an unresponsive juvenile girl outside of a residence in the 1200 block of 10th Avenue. Upon arrival, officers located the child and began administering CPR. Rockford Fire Department was immediately dispatched as well. They arrived on the scene and transported the child to a local hospital where she was later pronounced deceased. A perimeter was immediately established and a Rockford police officer who was assigned with a K-9 located a male that matched the description of the suspect near 9th Street and Woodruff Street. The male, later identified as Antonio Monroe, was taken into custody after a brief struggle. He was also transported to a local hospital for an unrelated issue. Upon release, once Monroe was released from the local hospital, he will be transported to the Winnebago County Jail. The facts of this case has been reviewed with the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office, and the following charges have been authorized against Monroe. The first charge is first-degree murder. The second charge is attempted murder. 2 counts of kidnapping and 1 count of aggravated battery via strangulation. I will inform you that Monroe is a registered sex offender out of Blue Island, Illinois. Upon checking our records, we have not had any prior contact with him before this incident. I also want to add that I have been, from the time my phone rang yesterday in regards to this incident, my stomach has been in a knot. I met with the mom yesterday. My deepest condolences to that family. No one ever wants to get a knock on the door or hear from the police that their child has been murdered, especially an innocent child, 10 years old, seemingly doing nothing and definitely not deserving of such a heinous crime. For the residents, the one witness, I called somewhat of a witness, that did reach out to the police and flag down the officers. I want to thank them for whatever they saw. They were not afraid to stand up and report it. I can tell you Rockford Police Department has been working around the clock on this case. This is very much still an active investigation, and it's nowhere near the end at this point. I often say this, that the men and women of the Rockford Police Department do a phenomenal job with serving and protecting this city, and that holds true today. Once again, also I just want to add that, having kids being born and raised in Rockford, we're not living in the time where you just leave your kids outside playing and no one's watching over them. Kids aren't doing anything wrong, but unfortunately there's individuals out there that will cause harm to them. This is not anything unique of Rockford. When my phone rang yesterday, seemingly I was like, this isn't happening in our city. This is not something that we see here. We read about it, we hear about it in other places. Just want to reiterate, the individual that we have right now who's the perpetrator of this offense is not from this area. So we're still, looking into other reasons as to why he was here. And like I said, still very much an active investigation that we are continuing to work. Okay. At this time, I'll yield the floor to the mayor.
Thank you, Chief Red. This is truly a real-life nightmare. And honestly, it's probably worse than any nightmare or situation I could think of on my own. I think this is, again, just a real-life nightmare with a real-life monster. With every inch of my being my heart and my prayers go out to the family that's been impacted by such horrific violence. This, as the chief just said, does not happen in Rockford. Nor can we let this action define us. As deep and as personal and cutting as this horrific and heinous crime is, I think our response needs to be matched with that same significance. We need to wrap our arms and our love and our support around this family that's been impacted by this heinous crime and all the victims. Honestly, and this is also one of those crimes that there's not going to be anyone who's not impacted by it. If you're a resident who helped respond, if you're a dispatcher, if you're a police department, if you're paramedics, every parent in our community, every resident that has a heartbeat. I will say we need to make sure that we're allowing some space for the family and also space for our community to grieve, and we need to be there and provide that support. Again, I really believe that our community response needs, and the community healing needs to be equivalent to this heinous crime. So it needs to be intentional, it needs to be true, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be as long as necessary. We'll also add, we as a community will be doing a deep dive to find out how the hell this man and monster came into our community, and find out every single thing that we can about this individual. We need to review all the policies, procedures, practices, and laws taking place in any part that he was, any city or community that he was in, that brought him to our community to do such a heinous crime on an absolutely innocent young people. I mean, I'm a father. I have a 7-year-old daughter. And I just can't understand how someone has this in their being to do something like this, to something as sweet and beautiful as that. So again, I would ask the city and the residents, you know, if you are hurting, if you are grieving, if you do get triggered, please seek help. I would also ask, and I know it's difficult for the media and everyone else, please provide this family with some space and some patience and some care that you would want the same for your own family, because I can't even comprehend what they are going through at this difficult time. Lastly, I just want to say, as the chief mentioned, I do want to thank the resident who spoke up. I want to thank the dispatchers who took an incredibly difficult call. I want to thank all the first responders for their professionalism and their dedication, and absolutely their diligence, the state's attorney's office, Chief Red herself, and her leadership team, to make sure that we were able to catch this monster. Now, this monster needs to get everything that this person deserves. With that, I know the chief and I will take questions.
Just as a father, you know, going through this, you touched a little bit on this. I mean, these kids seemed like they were just playing outside. Were they lured somewhere? I mean, what was kind of, I guess for both of you, what happened?
Just real quick, because it is an active investigation, we do know that there was some conversation that took place before the horrific event.
That 6-year-old was with her sister during all of this and then was able to escape, or what was the 6-year-old who ran to mom? How did that happen?
So it listed in the charges, she did get away at some point, but I will tell you, there's 2 counts of strangulation, and the 6-year-old was strangled as well.
What's the 6-year-old's condition now?
Treated and released.
Okay. And you talked about the struggle with that suspect. What happened?
But that was a brief encounter where an officer took him down, so not very forthcoming when he encountered the police.
I spoke with neighbors in the area today, and there are a lot of other kids and a lot of other families that live nearby. So to those people that are living there, you know, they don't want to be in fear of their children going outside. What do you say to those families right now?
Just to reiterate what I stated earlier, growing up in this city, I had the ability to stay outside and play until the street lights came on. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore due to 6 individuals that managed to make their way into the community. As a parent myself, I became an avid bike rider because my kids wanted to ride bikes. So we know this is not the time of the yesteryears, and we have to watch over our children.
Can you spell the suspect's first and last name, Antonio Monroe?
Michelle will send out a press release to you all. So Antonio is the typical spelling in Monroe, Monroe.
So can you, and I know you're still looking into all this with the investigation, but can you paint us a little picture of just kind of what had happened, how this could have happened with these kids outside? I mean, did this man just show up? Was, you know, as parents, we're very concerned, and so we just kind of want to know.
Well, we have yet to identify his reasoning for being in Rockford.
Okay.
So, you know, that particular place, that particular time, we have not found a connection at this point. Without going into too many details, that's a very transient community over there. It's probably the best way that I can put it. Individuals that, you know, are seemingly roaming around in that area.
Do you have any words of advice or words of encouragement to parents to kind of how to keep their kids safe, especially if someone approaches their children and kind of things like that?
Well, I guess I reflect back to even my kids. We don't talk to strangers. You know, there's different things that we put out in regards to how kids can stay safe. As I'm looking at Michelle nod my head, that's one of the things we'll get out here. If not today, you'll definitely see it tomorrow. But, you know, parents should be having those tough conversations with those kids. Individuals that you do not know, you know, the whole stranger danger. I just know where my mind went, where we seemingly stay. Even in a uniform, I know kids that are very well versed. They won't talk to the police, and I'm in uniform. And that's okay, because I tell them you did good. Mom told you don't talk to strangers, you did good. So, you know, seemingly with this one, you know, kids moving away from those strange individuals that they don't know as well. So.
For how long was the girl missing before found?
Well, we got the call at roughly 12:07 p.m. and officers were there at 12:40 because the initial response was to mom's house. And then we get a call from a individual that's in the neighborhood that located the little girl.
Is there any rhyme or reason, anything you can say from how she made it from, you know, mom's house to this location?
Kids were outside playing.
Okay.
They were outside playing. We do know that for a fact. Neighbors reported seeing them outside playing.
We had heard from the neighborhood that there are some abandoned buildings that are over there. Were the kids taken inside anywhere?
No, we have no reason to believe that any kids were taken inside of any abandoned buildings. Sure.
So, I'll let Chief answer all the case-sensitive information, but abandoned buildings, so, yeah, that neighborhood has them. Truthfully, too many of our neighborhoods have them. I think this is typically, or I shouldn't say typically, you look at some of these neighborhoods that have high crime rates and have high poverty rates. Too many of them have vacant and blighted and abandoned buildings. I think that's why myself, City Council, our administration has made fighting blight so important and so critical. If that's, you know, tearing down the 80 to 120 homes that we've tried to take down, or if that is, you know, creating the CDFI, the land bank, working with the county to revamp the trustee program, because we know not only, yeah, they are, you know, drag on property values, but more importantly, they're havens for criminal activity.
But had nothing to do with this specific case, right? Any of the abandoned buildings?
I can't speak to it.
I have another question for you, Mayor. I spoke to a man who lives about 2 doors down from where it happened today. He said, you know, he's called the city about, you know, those blighted properties. He's called the police department about those blighted properties, and, you know, he wants to see, you know, change to prevent things like this from happening again. So to those neighbors who feel like, you know, they have made their voice heard, or at least they're trying to, you know, what do you say to that individual?
So one, I would say thank you for making your voice heard. I would say two, we are listening, and if you look at the actions that we're taking, one, the problem often is outweighing the resources that we typically have. But with that being said, we try to be as creative as we can and utilize more and more partners. If that's, Region 1 Planning Council, you have in the Land Bank, the Community Development Financial Institution, many different programs that we've worked. If it's a residential rehab program, we just announced again. If it's the Habitat for Humanity partnership that we've created to rehab some of these blighted properties, it is a top priority. I don't know the specific addresses that they mentioned to you. I'll get those from you after this, and I can let you know where they stand. I would say the other item is there's some of this that isn't always in the city of Rockford's control. We may go after a property and want to demolish it, and that property owner may fight us in court, and we won't be able to demolish it. That happens on large commercial buildings as well as residential homes in our neighborhoods. And so we have a legal team, and we have lawyers literally dedicated just to fighting those cases.
When you say you guys are moving forward a deep dive, what does that entail? Just to figure out where this man came from?
However you want to do
If you're referencing our suspect?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't say deep dive. Mayor said deep dive. So, but part of our investigation will entail where he's been, where he's come from. And specifically, as I stated, we're not sure why he was in Rockford. So that's part of that ongoing investigation that we have.
I would just add, it was stated by the chief previously that he's a registered sex offender. There's a lot of information that I want and questions I have that I think probably most parents, most neighbors probably have. And I think every single one of those questions that we all have need to be answered. And then if there's loopholes or gaps in the system, if it's in the state or in a different community, we need to point those out and work to fix them so that this type of crime never happens to anyone.
So if there's no other questions, just real quick, I want to thank all of those that were involved in the investigation. We had officers that stayed over late. Last night we had officers that came in early, as well as our detectives that were called in as well. Yesterday was very, very, very busy, as well as the 911 center. It's difficult. People often see the uniform and they don't think about the human side behind it. So we have to do our due diligence as well in regards to taking care of those officers, even the ones that were on scene doing CPR on the child who was later pronounced deceased, as well as the dispatchers that are taking the calls. A very emotional day for us as well. And like I said, words cannot express what was going through my mind when I received that call. And I hope I never have to go through anything like that again. So thank you all for coming out.